I died on the operating table, my heart giving out, while my husband sat in the waiting room, already planning his new life with my $2 million life insurance payout. But then my eyes snapped open. The surgery hadn't happened yet, and the poisoned coffee he used to kill me was right in his hand. The first thing I registered was the suffocating smell of sterile alcohol pads and cheap institutional bleach. It was a smell I had taken to the grave. A moment ago, I was drowning in an ocean of agonizing pain. I remembered the blinding overhead lights of operating room 4, the sudden, frantic screaming of the heart monitors, and the terrified eyes of the anesthesiologist above his surgical mask. My chest had felt like it was being crushed in a vice, a fiery, unnatural burning tearing through my veins as the anesthesia interacted violently with whatever was already in my system. I remembered the cold darkness pulling me under, the absolute certainty that I was dying, and the crushing betrayal that accompanied my final fading thought, Arthur. Now I was breathing. The air filled my lungs in greedy, desperate gasps. I gripped the thin, scratchy hospital blanket, my knuckles turning white. My heart was beating, a steady, strong, rhythmic thump against my ribs. "Hey, sleepyhead, look what I smuggled in." The voice sent a paralyzing jolt of pure ice down my spine. I turned my head slowly, the cervical collar of my hospital gown shifting uncomfortably against my neck. There he stood, Arthur Pendleton, my husband of 5 years. He was perfectly styled as always, his sandy blonde hair casually swept back, wearing the expensive navy cashmere sweater I had bought him for our anniversary. He looked like the picture of a devoted, concerned spouse. But looking at him now, the veil of my naive love was completely torn away. I didn't see the charismatic architect who had swept me off my feet. I saw a murderer holding the murder weapon. In his right hand was a steaming cardboard cup from a high-end local cafe, the Roasted Bean. I know the pre-op rules are strict, but I slipped Dr. Harrison a 20 to look the other way. Arthur chuckled softly, walking toward my bedside. His smile was disarming, practiced, and flawless. Black coffee, no sugar, no cream, just the way you like it. It's exactly 2 hours before your procedure, so technically, you're in the clear for clear liquids. I figured it would help settle those nerves. In my previous life, just minutes ago in my mind, but a timeline entirely erased in this new reality. I had taken that cup with immense gratitude. I was terrified of the routine gallbladder removal. Arthur had been my rock. I had drunk every last drop of that dark roast, marveling at how bitter it tasted, which he had easily brushed off as a new seasonal blend. 30 minutes later, they wheeled me into surgery. 10 minutes after the anesthesia was administered, I was dead. I stared at the cup. Steam curled from the plastic lid, carrying the rich, acidic aroma of roasted coffee beans, and underneath it, a faint, almost imperceptible chemical sweetness. "Chloe, honey?" Arthur tilted his head, his blue eyes feigning innocent concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost. Are you in pain?" I am looking at a ghost, I thought. My own. "I'm fine," I managed to say, my voice raspy and foreign to my own ears. I forced my facial muscles to relax, forcing down the primal, screaming urge to leap out of the bed and claw his eyes out. I needed to be smart. If I panicked, if I screamed that he was trying to kill me, I would be dismissed as a hysterical patient suffering from pre-surgical anxiety. I needed proof. I needed to trap him. Arthur held the cup out to me. Here, drink it while it's hot. I reached out, but instead of taking the cup, I placed my hand firmly over his wrist. I felt his pulse beneath my fingertips. It was slightly elevated. "You know, Arthur," I said slowly, keeping my eyes locked on his, "I think I'm going to pass. My stomach is completely in knots. Even the smell of it is making me nauseous." A micro-expression of irritation flashed across his handsome face. A twitch of the jaw, a slight narrowing of the eyes, before the mask of the doting husband slammed back into place. "Come on, Chloe," he urged, his tone taking on that gentle, patronizing edge he always used when he wanted his way. "You've had a massive caffeine headache all morning. Just take a few sips. It'll make you feel so much better before you go under." "No." I released his wrist and leaned back against the pillows, folding my arms. "I really don't want it. Put it on the tray." Arthur stood frozen for a fraction of a second. The script in his head was going off the rails. In his meticulously crafted plan, the obedient, trusting wife was supposed to drink the spiked coffee, go to sleep, and never wake up. The coroner would find a tragic, unforeseen chemical interaction, perhaps blaming the anesthesiologist or an undiagnosed heart defect. Arthur would collect the massive life insurance policy we had just updated 3 months ago at his insistence, and he would finally clear the catastrophic gambling debts he thought I didn't know about. Oh, I knew about them now. In those final moments of my previous life, as my brain desperately fired its last synapses, the puzzle pieces had slammed together with agonizing clarity. The late-night phone calls from clients, the sudden draining of our joint savings account that he blamed on a banking glitch, the hidden burner phone I had found in his golf bag, and his sudden, intense relationship with Beatrice Gallagher, the surgical nurse coordinator at this very hospital. "Suit yourself," Arthur finally said, his voice tight. He set the cup down on the rolling tray table beside my bed, but he didn't push it away. He left it right on the edge, practically under my nose. "But if you get a migraine in the recovery room, don't say I didn't warn you." He shoved his hands into his pockets and walked over to the window, staring out at the grey, overcast city skyline. The silence in the room grew heavy, thick with the unsaid tension of a lethal chess game. I looked at the coffee cup. The brown liquid sloshed gently against the lid. That cup was my salvation, and his ticket to a life sentence. But I couldn't just leave it there. If Arthur realized I was suspicious, he would simply accidentally knock it into the trash and destroy the evidence. I needed to secure it, and I needed to expose him right here, right now, before the surgical prep team arrived. The digital clock on the wall read 9:15 a.m. Surgery was scheduled for 10:00 a.m. I had 45 minutes to dismantle my husband's life. I took a deep breath, steeling myself. I reached over to the bedside control panel and pressed the red nurse call button. Arthur turned around from the window, his brow furrowed. "What are you doing? Are you in pain?" "I'm feeling really strange, Arthur," I lied, though my heart was genuinely hammering against my ribs. "I'm having palpitations. My chest feels tight." Arthur's eyes darted toward the untouched coffee cup on the tray, then back to me. A flicker of genuine panic crossed his face. This wasn't part of his timeline. If I started showing symptoms of distress now, before the surgery, they would delay the operation. His perfect alibi of complications during surgery would be ruined. "It's just anxiety, Chloe," he said, stepping quickly toward the bed. He reached out to press the cancel button on the call remote, but I snatched it away, clutching it to my chest. "Don't," I snapped, letting a hint of my real anger bleed into my voice. "Something is wrong. I know my own body." Before Arthur could argue further, the heavy wooden door to my room swung open. It wasn't the regular floor nurse. It was Beatrice Gallagher. Beatrice was striking, in a cold, clinical sort of way. Auburn hair pulled back into a severe bun, sharp cheekbones, and dark green scrubs that fit her a little too perfectly. When her eyes landed on me, and then on Arthur, I saw the invisible silent communication pass between them. A tightening of her lips, a subtle shake of his head. They were in this together. Beatrice, the surgical coordinator, was the one who had insured Dr. Harrison, a brilliant but notoriously overworked and distracted surgeon, was assigned to my case. She was the one who controlled the flow of the prep room. "Mrs. Pendleton," Beatrice said, her voice smooth and professional, though her eyes were cold. "The front desk said you pressed the call button. We are getting ready to transport you to pre-op. Is there an issue?" "Yes," I said loudly, sitting up straighter. "I need to see Dr. Harrison immediately. I am experiencing severe tachycardia, dizziness, and a strange metallic taste in my mouth." Beatrice glanced at the monitors beside my bed. My heart rate was indeed elevated, hovering around 115 BPM, thanks entirely to the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Your vitals are a bit elevated, which is perfectly normal for pre-surgical anxiety," Beatrice countered smoothly, stepping closer to the bed. She reached for the blood pressure cuff. "Let me just give you a mild sedative to calm you down before we roll you out." "No!" I yanked my arm away so violently that the IV line taped to the back of my hand pulled painfully. "Do not push any medications into my IV. I want the surgeon. Now!" Arthur stepped in, playing the embarrassed, apologetic husband to perfection. "B. Nurse Gallagher. I'm so sorry. She's just terrified of going under. Chloe, sweetheart, you're making a scene. Let the nurse do her job. If you try to sedate me against my will, I will scream bloody murder and claim assault," I said, locking eyes with Beatrice. "Page Dr. Harrison, and I want a full pre-op toxicology screen drawn immediately." That word, toxicology, hit the room like a bomb. Arthur went completely rigid. All the color drained from his face, leaving him looking like a wax mannequin. Beatrice's hand froze mid-air over my IV line. A toxicology screen," Beatrice stammered, her professional veneer cracking for the first time. "Mrs. Pendleton, that is highly irregular. We already ran your standard blood panels yesterday." "I don't care," I said. "I feel completely unnatural, and I want it on record before anyone administers anesthesia to me." Arthur realized the trap was springing shut. He moved fast. "You know what? She's right," Arthur said, with forced, manic cheerfulness. "Maybe it's the coffee. Maybe they gave me caffeinated instead of decaf at the shop. Silly me, bringing it in. Let me just get rid of this. It's making the whole room smell." He lunged for the tray table, his hand outstretched to grab the cardboard cup, but I was faster. I slapped his hand away with stinging force, grabbed the cup, and held it tightly against my chest. The hot liquid splashed slightly against the plastic lid, burning my fingers, but I didn't let go. "Don't touch it, Arthur," I growled, my voice dropping an octave. I wasn't playing the scared wife anymore. Arthur stared at me, staring into the eyes of a woman who had already died once because of him. He saw the cold, unyielding knowing in my gaze. He backed away slowly, his hands raised in a placating gesture, though his chest was heaving. The door opened again, and Dr. Harrison walked in, looking at a tablet in his hand. He was an older man, greying at the temples, wearing his surgical scrubs and a weary expression. "What seems to be the delay in here?" Dr. Harrison asked, looking up from his screen. "We have an OR waiting and a tight schedule today." "Dr. Harrison," I said, my voice remarkably steady, "I am refusing surgery at this time." The doctor blinked, taken aback. "Chloe, we discussed this. The gallstones are severe. If we don't take it out, you risk a rupture." "I understand," I said. "But I have reason to believe that my husband has tampered with my pre-surgical fast." He brought me this coffee. I held up the cup. "I want this liquid sent to the hospital lab immediately to be tested for blood thinners, beta blockers, or any chemical compounds that contraindicate with general anesthesia. And I want my blood drawn right now by an independent phlebotomist, not Nurse Gallagher, to ensure I haven't been poisoned." The silence that followed was absolute. Dr. Harrison looked from me to the cup, to Arthur, and finally to Beatrice. "Poisoned?" Dr. Harrison repeated, his medical mind struggling to process the sheer absurdity of the accusation. "Chloe, that is a very serious allegation." "She's out of her mind," Arthur barked, his voice cracking with hysteria. "Dr. Harrison, she's having a psychotic break from the stress. Give her the sedative." "If she's having a psychotic break, Arthur," Dr. Harrison said slowly, his tone shifting from weary to sharp, "then she certainly isn't in a state to consent to major abdominal surgery." The doctor looked at Arthur's trembling hands, then at my fierce, uncompromising grip on the coffee cup. Dr. Harrison wasn't just a surgeon. He was a veteran of the emergency room. He knew how to read a room, and he knew what guilt looked like. "Nurse Gallagher," Dr. Harrison ordered, not taking his eyes off Arthur. "Page the floor supervisor and get a phlebotomy team in here. Now!" Beatrice stood frozen, her eyes darting frantically to Arthur for instruction. "Do it, Beatrice," Dr. Harrison snapped, his voice echoing in the small room. As Beatrice turned and practically ran out of the room, Arthur's facade shattered completely. He looked wildly at the door, then at the window, like a trapped animal calculating the odds of survival. His scheme was unraveling, thread by toxic thread, right before his eyes, and I was going to watch him hang himself with every single one of them. The next 20 minutes played out in a hyper-realistic blur of frantic hospital protocol and sheer, desperate panic from the man who thought he had outsmarted death itself. Dr. Harrison stood blocking the doorway, his imposing frame ensuring my husband couldn't make a sudden exit. Within moments, the floor supervisor, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda, marched into the room, followed by 2 burly hospital security guards. "Mr. Pendleton," Brenda said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, "I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the patient and have a seat in the corner. Now." Arthur's charismatic facade was gone, replaced by a sweaty, hyperventilating wreck. "Wreck, this is a misunderstanding. She's my wife. I love her. Chloe, please, tell them to stop this insanity." I didn't answer him. I simply handed the heavily guarded cardboard cup of coffee to the senior phlebotomist, who had just wheeled her cart into the room. "Seal this," I instructed her calmly. "Chain of custody starts right now. I want it handed directly to the hospital's head of pathology." While they drew my blood, 6 vials to ensure every possible panel could be run, Arthur collapsed into the corner visitor's chair, burying his face in his hands. He was rocking slightly, a physical manifestation of his rapidly unraveling scheme. He knew that the moment that coffee hit the mass spectrometer, his life as a free man was over. It took less than an hour for the preliminary results to come back, and by that time, the local police had already been dispatched. Detective Gregory Hayes, a weary-looking man in a rumpled suit with incredibly sharp eyes, stepped into my room just as Dr. Harrison returned with a printout of the lab results. Dr. Harrison looked physically sick. He glanced at Arthur, who was now flanked by the 2 security guards, and then handed the paper to Detective Hayes. "It wasn't caffeine, Detective," Dr. Harrison said, his voice trembling with a mixture of professional outrage and horror. "The liquid in that cup contained a massive, concentrated dose of potassium chloride mixed with a high-grade muscle relaxant, succinylcholine. If she had ingested this prior to general anesthesia, her heart would have stopped within minutes of going under," Detective Hayes finished grimly, reading the report. "And the muscle relaxant would have made it look like a tragic, fatal reaction to the surgical paralytics. A perfect, untraceable heart attack." The evidence stacked against him. Detective Hayes didn't waste any time. He officially declared my hospital room a potential crime scene and placed Arthur under arrest for attempted murder. As the handcuffs clicked around my husband's wrists, the reality of my rebirth fully set in. I had literally rewritten my own autopsy. But Arthur wasn't going down alone. As they dragged him out into the sterile hallway, I heard the commotion from the nurses' station. Beatrice Gallagher had tried to quietly clock out and slip through the emergency exit. She didn't make it. The police apprehended her in the stairwell. Over the next few days, as I recovered from my delayed and completely safe gallbladder surgery, the detective kept me updated on the sprawling investigation. Beatrice, terrified of spending the rest of her life in prison for conspiracy to commit murder, flipped on Arthur almost immediately. She sang like a canary, handing over the digital trail of their affair and the blueprints of their sinister plot. The police uncovered a mountain of damning evidence. The motive: Arthur's secret. Offshore gambling accounts were bleeding him dry. He owed nearly $800,000 to an illegal sports betting syndicate out of Chicago. The payoff: a newly minted $2 million life insurance policy on me, where Arthur was the sole beneficiary. He had forged my signature on the updated medical release forms just 3 months prior. The accomplice: text messages between Arthur and Beatrice, detailing the exact dosage needed to induce a fatal myocardial infarction without raising the suspicion of the medical examiner. Beatrice had stolen the drugs directly from the hospital's locked pharmacy dispensary. The escape plan: flight records showed Arthur had booked 2 one-way first-class tickets to Buenos Aires for himself and Beatrice, scheduled for exactly 2 weeks after my tragic surgical complication. My survival hadn't just ruined a murder. It had exposed a sprawling financial and romantic betrayal so deep it made my chest ache, not from the surgery, but from the sheer audacity of the man I had slept next to for 5 years. The trial of the state versus Arthur David Pendleton commenced exactly 8 months later, under the heavy grey skies of early November. By then, the story had become a media spectacle. The handsome, successful architect who tried to meticulously murder his wealthy wife on the operating table. The courtroom was packed every single day, buzzing with the morbid curiosity of strangers who wanted a glimpse of a real-life monster. I walked into courtroom 302, wearing a perfectly tailored crimson suit. It was a deliberate choice. The color of power, and a stark reminder of the blood he had so desperately tried to stop from flowing through my veins. Arthur, on the other hand, looked entirely diminished. The impeccably styled, arrogant man I had once loved was completely gone. In his place sat a pale, hollowed-out shell in an oversized Orange County jumpsuit. His sandy blonde hair was thinning and unkempt, his hands trembling constantly against the defense table. He couldn't even bring himself to meet my eyes across the aisle. He knew exactly what he was looking at. A ghost who had clawed her way back to drag him straight to hell. The turning point of the trial, and the moment that shattered Arthur's fragile defense, was Beatrice Gallagher's testimony. Beatrice took the stand on a rainy Tuesday, looking utterly broken. Desperate to avoid a maximum life sentence, she detailed every sick, twisted facet of their conspiracy. She sobbed as she read their text messages aloud for the jury, messages where Arthur coldly referred to me as the ATM and complained about how long my natural demise was taking. But the most chilling twist came when the prosecution asked how they knew the exact dosage of succinylcholine and potassium chloride to use without immediately alerting the anesthesiologist. Beatrice choked on her tears, refusing to look at Arthur. He practiced, Beatrice whispered into the microphone, her voice echoing in the dead-silent courtroom. Arthur took the stolen vials to his hunting cabin upstate. He tested the lethal mixture on 3 stray dogs to ensure the muscle relaxant would mask the cardiac arrest perfectly before he ever brought that coffee cup into Chloe's hospital room. A collective gasp rippled through the gallery. Several jurors visibly recoiled in absolute disgust. At that exact moment, I watched whatever microscopic shred of sympathy the jury might have harbored for my husband evaporate into thin air. While the criminal trial dominated the headlines, my attorney, a ruthless litigator named Sarah Jenkins, was quietly and systematically dismantling Arthur's financial life in civil court. Because Arthur was incarcerated, facing a mountain of legal fees, and technically guilty of extreme marital misconduct and fraud, our divorce proceedings were an absolute slaughter. I showed no mercy. I took the sprawling suburban estate, his luxury vehicles, the joint investment portfolios, and his prized vintage watch collection. I left him with nothing but his staggering, unpaid syndicate gambling debts. The criminal jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. When the foreman read the guilty verdict, the courtroom erupted, but I remained perfectly still. The judge, a stern woman with zero tolerance for Arthur's blubbering apologies, delivered the final blow. "Arthur Pendleton," the judge announced, her voice a gavel of absolute finality. "For the charges of attempted murder in the first degree, insurance fraud, and conspiracy, you have demonstrated a level of calculated cruelty that chills the blood. I sentence you to 35 years in the state penitentiary without the possibility of parole." Arthur's knees buckled. He collapsed against the defense table, letting out a guttural, pathetic wail as the bailiffs grabbed his arms to physically drag him from the room. Beatrice received 20 years for her complicity and the theft of controlled narcotics. As I walked out of the courthouse that afternoon, the crisp autumn wind hit my face, and for the first time in what felt like 2 lifetimes, my lungs expanded with the sweet air of genuine freedom. I had kept the life he tried to violently steal, and I had taken the future he tried to fund with my death. I rebuilt my world entirely from the ashes of his greed. I sold our house, the walls held too many toxic echoes, and purchased a stunning, sunlit penthouse downtown. I even started a philanthropic foundation to help victims of financial domestic abuse, turning the very money Arthur had killed me for into a lifeline for others who were trapped in the dark. Now, every single morning, I walk out onto my balcony, overlooking the waking city. I brew myself a fresh cup of coffee. I take it black. No sugar, no cream. I hold the warm ceramic in my hands, breathing in the rich, bitter aroma, and I take a long, deep sip. It tastes like absolute victory. And somewhere, in a cold, concrete cell, Arthur is waking up to the agonizing reality that his perfect murder was completely destroyed by a single, refused cup of coffee. If my story of betrayal, rebirth, and ultimate justice kept you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button and share this video with anyone who loves a true story of revenge and survival. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible, real-life storytelling and thrilling drama every single week. Your support helps bring these stories to light. Have you ever caught someone in a massive lie that completely changed how you saw them? Tell me below.